It's strange. I came on the bench that first day, felt completely at ease as a county judge doing the job. Beverly, who was my fiance at the time, I passed me a note up and said, that I'm so proud of you. I was sitting up there in the courtroom, and I felt completely at ease doing the job. I guess I learned probably during the practice of law rather than from judges thereafter. A lot of the judges I really looked up to were circuit court. Susan Schaefer, of course, was always a favorite of mine. Judge McGarry and Judge Beach were people who were enjoyable to practice in front of. Judge Harry Cohen Tampa was somebody. When I tried case over federal court, those were good people. So I'm sure I picked up, but there wasn't anybody I particularly styled myself after. I don't think anybody would appreciate it if they heard that I styled myself after them. I think what the biggest thing was the fact that I withdrew from a lot of things I was formerly involved in. And I know Judge Hellinger, Judge Jack Hellinger now, who's been a friend of mine for years. And I tended to stay away from people because I just didn't want the appearance to be, and I didn't want the pressure for myself that if I was to be a friend with them and they're also going to be in front of me, I felt pressure with that. And he said nobody, and he was being kind to say it, and other people have said that nobody would ever think for a moment, Hank, that you were going to be anything other than unbiased. But the appearance of it was such that I tended to withdraw. And it becomes a lonely job. I remember over the years going to visit certain judges on the bench or seeing them, and you couldn't get out of their office. And I understood that later on because you don't have a lot of camaraderie with people other than your colleagues. So when you get somebody in there, you kind of tend to talk their ear off. And I've tried to remember that I try not to talk people's ear off. But you get a little lonely in that regard. And of course, I don't think beyond that as far as my conduct or, I don't think anything changed. I was comfortable with my role in the community. Not for me as a judge, but the people out there. When I see the catastrophes that occur in lives every day, the division I'm in now, the domestic violence cases, I can tell you tomorrow morning you come in there and you'll hear the word misunderstanding used 20 times. A misunderstanding is now a criminal violation where the legislature says you'll arrest somebody. So at one point in our lives seemed minuscule or something separate or private to us is no longer. And the consequences of each of those things is dramatic. Circuit court judges deal in years. It's nothing to talk about 10, 15, 20 years. In county court, to me, for the most part, if you're talking 10 days on a county court case, you're talking about a very important 10 days. During this particular time, if it means a person loses a job, probably the best job they're ever going to have, I'm going to take away because I'm putting them in jail for 10 days. I think long and hard about that. So it's the consequences of individual actions and what I see people doing out there the other day. That's the thing that suppressed me the most. It's a whole lot different today, and maybe it's a matter of my age, being somewhat older than my colleagues. When I came in, I was not as young as some are now, but it seemed like there was slightly more camaraderie. It's just changed as far as knowing each other out in the practice of law before you come in here. There's so many people now that I had never known before, and then all of a sudden they're on the bench by whatever process they're there. So in that regard, you don't know each other beforehand before you come on, you're thrown together. The other thing is, I think the role of a judge has changed dramatically. I always thought law was a great academic exercise. It's neat in books, it's like a puzzle, it's fun to work. Then you put people into it and it starts getting real complex. And with the legislation over the years, instead of a legal job, it's become more of a social worker job. We've attempted to make it that anyway, and we're not good at that. I've never thought that the court system was going to change society. We're a Band-Aid at best. So I think that we flatter ourselves to think if we're going to change, and the best we can do is try to hold our own as a social service agency, which we've become under the laws of the state now, it seems like. That's why it's probably a good time for me to leave. I've always been a 2H pencil and a pack of paper, man. And as I sit here and y'all have got a camera on me there, and I've got a telephone that's got a number of lines, which I have trouble taking care of. Behind me is a computer screen. And I sit on the bench, we all have a computer screen, and if I go to traffic court, I'm supposed to follow the docket. Instead of with the pieces of paper, whichever you feel very comfortable with, I'm supposed to follow along on the computer there. And I have trouble with that at home, but I have a wife and a son who can carry me through there, and I have a judicial assistant who can help me out some here. But even research now is, of course, I'm moving out here now, so I don't have the books I once had or when I had Florida statutes annotated. I enjoy a book. It's just like if I want to read something, I have a Kindle, or I think it's a Kindle I have. I was given that. I still enjoy going to Haslam's and get a book. In studying cases, I enjoyed getting Florida statutes annotated. I enjoyed getting the advanced sheets. I enjoyed looking at those. I don't feel comfortable for me to go back here on the computer and put something in that I know what's really out there. There's something hidden around the corner, and I don't know what those corners are. So I don't feel as comfortable at the end of my research, and I just don't enjoy it as much as I do with the book. So it's a sign of the times. It's passed me by quite a number of years ago, the technology has. Well, I'll tell you a term that I used once, and one of my people used with me the other day. It's the culture in county court in this court, and it's the culture of cooperation in the county court. They asked me, I put in my name once for a circuit court judge, and they asked me, why didn't you put it in years ago? And I said, because it was more important to me at that time that Hank Andringa was a county court judge than it was. I said, there were any number of people that could have done the circuit court jobs as good or as better than me. But I felt like it was important for the county court, and I think any chief judge will tell you here that the thing has benefited them about as much as anything is the fact. The county court, the 13 or 14 county court judges cooperating will cover anything in Pasco. If you got something in Dade City, or the time they said, Hank, we need Dade City covered, I'll have somebody in Dade City, but that's because I have judges who will cover for each other here, cover for each other there, and they give me a phone call 3 minutes later, we'll have his problem solved. That's a nice thing for a chief judge. So I think any chief will tell you that's been the greatest service we've done, is beyond handling our own cases, what we've accomplished for the circuit and for Pinellas County, for all the circuit judges here. There's a certain amount of work that has to be covered by 14 judges. If you say each of you do it, some people can get buried today, some people can have very little. But if you have 14, you spread it out, you get it all done today, you go home at 5 o'clock. Court personnel don't get paid overtime. Jurors don't have to stay till 8 o'clock at night. And we could try another case tomorrow morning. So it just happens to work out best that way. And that's what I'm proudest of. You know, in county court, I'm not so sure how much legal significance we've had. I've had some cases, boy, this would be of very little excitement to people out there. Probably 10, 15 years ago. And I was sitting in a courtroom, and I thought how strange it was. It was in the old county court building down St. Pete. It's recently since been torn down. And I had a hearing on a Friday afternoon. It was one of the big insurance companies. It was a PIP case, personal injury protection case. And as part of personal injury protection, you get paid mileage for going to the doctor. And of course, if you pay the wrong amount of mileage, then the patient sues his insurance company through his attorney for the difference. So in other words, if they were going to pay you 20 cents a mile, then the real rate should be 25 cents a mile. It's not about the 5 cents so much as it is about those attorney's fees. And of course, there's cases out there, whether it's $80,000, $250,000 worth of attorney's fees where you litigate over something. Well, it turned out on a Friday afternoon, I was hearing a case, and the witness, could have been Geico or it could have been State Farm, I don't know. But the question was, how much do you reimburse somebody for the mileage? Seems like a rather mundane thing, not very interesting. Other than the fact that everybody and all the insurers, and particularly his company, I'm told all over the country, are waiting to hear from Judge Hank Andringa sitting on a Friday afternoon in this little courtroom one time about what the rate is to pay. And to do that, we had economics professors from several places, including the chairman of the economics department, who was a mentor of sorts to me in the graduate program when over at University of South Florida. So it was interesting to have him come in and be examined, cross-examined in front of me, one of his former students, about the significance. So it had a far-reaching impact on what was going to take place. Of course, it didn't last that long, because shortly thereafter, whether the price of fuel went up, the age of an automobile, what you had to pay for oil all changed, so maybe the amortization of that car was changed. But at that moment, it was a big deal. And it kind of struck me what a mundane moment it seemed on a Friday afternoon with not a single spectator in the courtroom, but it had some significance. And I think beyond that, the cases I had, it's strange. They always end up being the animal cases, whether it be Beethoven the dog, who was sentenced to the death penalty for biting a child, and Bob Merkel, former U.S. attorney and Senate aspirant, asked that the governor give clemency, I believe, to Beethoven the dog. And within the last few years, of course, post-Katrina, I had Katrina dogs, as there's now one of them who was with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, another with another lady out at Rankin Beach. I had Barry Cohen representing Pam Bondi. I had Jeff Brown representing the lady, and of course 2 fine people who had taken over dogs that were thought abandoned out in Katrina, but the people came from there to claim them, and they were represented by Murray Silverstein, who I think probably got the pro bono award for the state of Florida for representing these people. And in a case, we had hearings every week because it had some significance, and it ended up settling. Animal cases get a whole lot more notoriety than anything else, but they were, particularly at the timing, the Katrina dogs at the time were following up an event of national significance, and here we had people worrying about the animals. So that, to me, it was interesting. It was fun because I had good lawyers involved in the case. Once again, it's my feeling about the thing is, yeah, one thing you can always control is, and you'll hear me harp tomorrow morning at 8:30. This calendar says it's going to start at 8:30 tomorrow morning. I intend to be on the bench at 8:30 because it's kind of like I send out an invitation for somebody to be there, and if I'm not there at 8:30, that's kind of rude of me. I expect them to be there, otherwise it's kind of rude of them. Then you work hard all day long. That's why I'm afraid I don't have the friends I once had, because I'm not involved in a lot of things where I feel uncomfortable. Is that the best way of doing it? It was for me. So obviously those are things all real easy. You show up at time, you work hard, you don't have any appearance of impropriety in any way. You do that, and boy, it's kind of tough to screw up this job. I tend to preach about the job, what I think is the right way of doing the job. And people probably get sick of hearing that from me. When I'm signing papers where people can't pay fines, they're saying, can I do community service because I can't pay a fine of X number of dollars? And I got Jay sitting out there and haven't had a raise in 6 years. And I asked her to be here, and I said, if the phone rings, it's going to be answered by a person and not a machine. If the person's got a question, you're going to be the last person they're going to talk to, and you're going to get it fixed. Because we work for the people. That's not too much to ask. And if we're going to ask that of them, how can I possibly do anything less as a public servant? And to use that phrase sounds rather stilted, but doggone it, the people are out there paying me to do this job. And what a great job I have. I got a covered parking place downstairs. I have a nice office here. I have staff that helps me out. I got the world's greatest job, and it seems like I lucked into it. It wasn't because of grand plan or great intellect I got it. I just happened to get into the thing, and I think I've been somewhat well suited to it. But if I don't owe the people everything for letting me have this job, then I've missed the boat there. I've missed the point somehow along the way.